Okay. I'm Dr. O'Leary. Thanks so much for joining our talk with Dr. Baltutis. I'm going to let, since we don't have any business to discuss for the mobile group, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our sponsor, who will then introduce our doctor who's speaking. And our sponsor is Heel House Call Veterinarian, who I'm also a co-founder of. But I thought Samuel would, who's our chief operator or whatever you are, director of operations, is going to introduce Dr. Baltutis for us. And she's going to go through and talk to us about some therio subjects. So Samuel, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Baltutis just over a year ago when she decided to hop on her journey with Heel House Call Veterinarian. And it's actually great to be here today and listen to her speak from a therio perspective. So Dr. Baltutis graduated from North Carolina State University College of Veterinary Medicine in 2017. She's on the board of directors for the Society for Theriogenology. And Dr. Baltutis is a Heel House Call veterinarian who not only provides mobile preventive and reproductive and illness care to pets in the greater Burlington area, and she actually does travel quite a bit. I've seen her take cases quite far from her house, but we'll also work with your practice on pregnancy, breeding, and reproductive surgery related issues and questions. So it was really important for me to hear Dr. Baltutis speak. We promote everything that she actually does to bring and foster a great community when it comes to breeding. And we're really, really lucky here at Heel to have Dr. Baltutis as a Heel House Call representative. And I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Samuel. And thank you to Heel for having me both as a franchisee and as a guest speaker at the mobile group. So my talk today is on making the world a better place by working with dog breeders. And this is something that I feel really passionate about because ultimately all dogs come from breeders. There are just responsible breeders and irresponsible breeders. We're going to talk about that a little bit more very shortly. And so I really believe that veterinarians should have a seat at the table in this conversation. And we're going to talk about how we can do that in an effective way. So first I wanted to start off kind of asking which of the following kind of describes your current interaction with dog breeders. And there's a chat box, so you can put in either an A, B, or a C, where A is, I feel confident that I have or can find answers to their questions. B is, I often feel unsure how to help them. And C is, I think they're useless and I avoid them if at all possible. So I will see if I can see the chat box. Aha, Dr. O'Leary, I knew that you were going to say B. Yeah. So I definitely started doing what I'm doing, right? Because I started out in the B area. I love theriogenology and I love the potential that it provides. The idea that I can help bring a life into this world that wouldn't be possible without me. That's something that really appeals to me. But when I first started in general practice, even though I had all of this therio background information and I had studied it a lot in school because it was my interest area, I still would have someone with a pregnant dog come in and I was word vomiting all these random thoughts that would flit through my head like, oh, and you need to deworm them. And I know that it wasn't effective because I felt unsure how to help them. And so I have started producing materials honestly, partially for myself so that I can say, okay, here's all the information that you need. And here's how I know that I can help your pet in whatever situation they're in. And so I am going to share a lot of those resources with you guys. And after the talk, we can provide the PDF documents and links. I definitely want you guys to have everything that I've made to help with dog breeders. So this question, why bother? So I know that there's a lot of ideology out there that's, we don't need dog breeders. We don't need to help them because we don't need them and they just shouldn't be doing it. So wanted to bring up this why bother. And first I wanted to kind of define like who I'm talking about when I say a dog breeder, because there's actually a lot of different sub types essentially. So on the one side, can you see my cursor? Can anyone see my cursor? If someone could unmute and tell me.
If I could figure out how to unmute. Yes, I can see it.
Okay, good. So on the one side, we have the responsible breeder, right? So it's entirely possible that you've never met this person if you are doing general practice. They are kind of what you could think of as unicorn clients, and you have them in your general practice too. You have unicorn clients, I mean, in your general practice too. They're the ones that they take all of your recommendations and they do what you said, and they're informed, and so they can communicate with you about the health of their pet, but they're not pushy about it and know it all about it, and they're, you know, and so these responsible breeders are really great to work with because they save money for emergencies. They don't want to spend it if they don't have to, but I mean, do any of us really? But they're willing to, and they do all the health testing that they need to do. They do everything that they're supposed to do. They want to do it right. Then the next category is probably what most people think of when they hear dog breeder in today's society. It's what I refer to and several other people refer to as puppy producers. So the goal of these people is to make puppies, and that is the ultimate goal. It does not matter like how healthy the parents are. It doesn't matter anything. They're trying to just produce puppies for financial gain. They don't want to spend a lot of money. They're just making as many puppies as possible to try to get money out of them. So that, and then you have everyone else. And so I think of it kind of as a spectrum. So you have responsible breeders on one side, puppy producers on the other side, and then everyone else in the middle. And I intentionally made it a gradient as a spectrum, because in your everyone else category, you have the people that they love their own family dog and they want another one just like her, and so they're just going to breed her that just the one time. And then you also have the people that are like, whoops, there's puppies that just dropped on the ground and I didn't even know she was pregnant. And I also include in everyone else rescue organizations. And what I mean by that is it's not uncommon. I've worked with several rescue organizations that end up with a pregnant dog in their rescue. And because it's not something that they deal with very often, they're just completely floundering and kind of they have no idea, you know, what to do. And they want to do the right thing. They don't have a lot of money to do it, but they want to do what they can for the puppies and for the mom. So I make it as a gradient. I think of it as a gradient because I think about being able to push people, right? So there's very, very few people that are going to be over here on the responsible breeder end of this bell curve, right? There's very few people, honestly, that are over here on the puppy producer side. And then everyone else is somewhere in the middle. And a lot of my resources focus on taking these people in the middle and pushing them that way. So pushing them towards the responsible breeder. I don't necessarily need to get them all the way to being a responsible breeder. I just need to get them a little bit closer that way. And this is why. We know that a puppy's lifetime health is strongly influenced by what happens to them in their socialization period, which is from 3 weeks old to 12 weeks old. So the things that they experience are what they think of as normal for the rest of their life. So when you get these dogs that say, you know, they're afraid of men in hats, or they're afraid of balloons, or they're afraid of strollers, or they're afraid of hardwood floors or concrete, or, you know, whatever it is, those are all things, anxieties that they developed during that socialization period because they didn't experience that as normal in part of their world. Handling is also a huge part of this. If it's not normal for me to have my feet touched between 3 and 12 weeks, it's not going to be normal for my feet to be touched for the rest of my life. Not that we can't overcome those anxieties, but introducing puppies to those things during that 3 to 12 weeks makes a huge impact on their health for their entire life, because their emotional health is its own thing, but it also influences the rest of how we can keep them healthy by interacting with the interactions that they do. Behavior is the number one reason that pets are relinquished back to shelters, that they basically become homeless. so if we can decrease behavior issues by increasing the socialization, we can have healthier pets and fewer that are going into the shelters. And then ultimately, it's all about the human animal bond, right? So we have deep, deep emotional connections with our pets, and we want to nurture and honor that for every pet and every human, every pet parent out there. And in order to do that, we need the pets to be as healthy as possible. And we do that by interacting with their socialization period. That 3 to 12 week period, which is the socialization period, that happens with the breeder for a majority of that time period. And so we need to be able, and again, by breeder, I'm talking about that everyone else category too. So we need to get education into those people's hands so that we have healthier dogs and we make the world a better place. So that's my why bother. So these are the general, 30,000 feet view of things that I expect from a responsible breeder, for me to call them a responsible breeder. So if you have someone that comes in and says, hey, I'm thinking about breeding my dog, what do you think? Which a lot of times they don't ask you, but if you do get lucky enough that someone will ask you, these are the things that you need to be looking for or need to be telling them that they need to be doing. A breeding animal should be at least 2 years old. I will be a little bit flexible on that with small breed dogs, and I will let them go on their third heat cycle, which is sometimes around 1.5 years, between 1.5 years to 2 years old. But definitely for large breed dogs, 2 years or older, we want them to be sexually and physically mature before they're breeding. There definitely are some puppy producers that will breed their dog on the first heat cycle. I am very frank with them, and I say that is like a 12-year-old or a 9-year-old girl or 12-year-old girl who just had her first period and then you got her pregnant. Like, that's not appropriate. A breeding animal should be healthy. That one's pretty self-explanatory. I include up-to-date on vaccines and preventatives. There are a lot of dog breeders that are very nervous about giving preventatives during pregnancy. There are multiple products that are safe. The ivermectin products, to start with, are safe during pregnancy. So those you can continue to give those even during pregnancy. I consider that a breeding animal should be generally friendly or manageable. There are definitely different temperaments that we're aiming for in different breeds, but any dog that we're going to be passing on those genetic traits, they should be manageable at the very least. So they should respond to their owner. You should be able to work with them. Health tested. The exact health testing is completely breed specific. At one point in time, I really wanted to have them all memorized. There's no way to have them all memorized. There's absolutely no way. My favorite website for this is actually Good Dog, so gooddog.com. And OFA, which is the Orthopedic Foundation for Animals, also has this information. The reason that I like Good Dog a little bit better is that it is client facing. So it shows you, this is what Good Dog considers an excellent breeder versus a good breeder versus an okay breeder. And they also, the other thing I like about Good Dog is that they have crossbreed standards in there too. So things like Labradoodles, Golden Doodles, all of the doodles, as well as other crossbreeds. Whereas OFA sticks to really more of the purebred dogs. And then the last thing, they should be brucellosis negative within the past 6 months. So brucellosis is an infectious disease that can be transmitted by bodily fluids. That includes respiratory fluids and reproductive fluids. So if they have come into contact with other dogs at all in the past 6 months, I require them to be brucellosis negative. Some people will go for 12 months, but I would definitely say pretty much on every breeding cycle, they should be negative. So those are my criteria for a responsible breeder. Again, these are unicorns. There aren't a lot of them, but this is the standard that I'm pushing for. I'm trying to push them as close to that as as we can get. And there are excellent breeders out there that are doing this. So if you do have the opportunity to work with a responsible breeder, what are some things that you could do for them? A lot of it, honestly, they're generally pretty well informed, but sometimes they'll learn things from other breeders. A lot of them are in breeder forums or Facebook groups, and they may need a little bit of guidance on what to believe. And if you have a breeder that's willing to ask you, hey, I read this thing on this Facebook post, "What do you think?" I would take it and run with it, because it means that they're actually asking you for your opinion. They don't necessarily always take your opinion, but they might. Then knowing what to recommend, that I'm going to help you out with, because I produced a document called the Responsible Breeder Checklist. That's one of the documents that I'm going to share with you guys. And it has very extensive, before you even think about breeding, before she's in season, when she's in season, when she's pregnant. We've got all of the stages. I'm going to give you guys that so that you can review it yourself, so that you know what to recommend, but then also that you can share that with your breeder clients. And then last but not least, on the bottom, I have refer down here. You just like, if you don't do neurosurgery, you would refer them to a neurosurgeon. Just like if you don't do, cataract surgery, you might refer them to an ophthalmologist. Therio is another specialty. And so if it's not something that you're comfortable with, that is totally fine. No one judges you for not doing cataract surgery. No one should judge you for not wanting to do reproductive medicine. But I do recommend that you know where you can refer them. And they might not go, but they might. And it's really about getting the information to them. Okay, guiding the middle. So the middle is going to be the vast majority of clients that you see. I would say almost all of them are going to be somewhere in the middle. A lot of times they're in over their heads. So they ended up with a pregnant dog. I have down here. Usually the dog is already pregnant by the time they come talk to you. And they are well-intentioned. Usually they love this dog, usually, but they just are lost. They're in over their heads. They don't think about, I don't know why it doesn't occur to people, but think about all of the health checks and the things that we do for human pregnancy, how many checks we have, how many, you got to do prenatal vitamins, you got to change your diet, you got to do, we accept that as normal, but people that logic doesn't cross over to dogs. Everything's the same. I mean, there are some differences, but the health is important. So they're in over their heads. They need your help. They don't necessarily know that you can help them, but they need your help. So what can you do for the middle? So I've got a couple tips of things that I would say most of the middle misses that we're going to talk about right here, but definitely send them the Responsible Breeder Checklist. And I also have an ultimate guide to building your whelping kit that I'm going to send you guys. Send them both of those documents and say, here's what you need to do. So first thing is folic acid. Folic acid does decrease midline defects. Ideally, it should be started before she's even pregnant. But if they come to you and she's already pregnant, go ahead and start the folic acid. It's not going to hurt. Make sure that they get one that does not have added calcium, because we do not want to supplement calcium before whelping. And then the range of folic acid is actually really, really wide. So it can be anywhere from 0.1 mg per kg to 5 milligrams per dog. So the 5 milligrams per dog range amount is the amount that Ohio State uses. They just blanket use the 5 milligrams per dog across species or across breeds. I kind of do in the middle, where small breed dogs, I do 800 micrograms, 800 micrograms twice a day. And I'll go up to the 5 milligrams per dog. So folic acid decreases midline defects. Number 2 is check what diet they're feeding. So a pregnant dog should be on a puppy food or an all life stages food after day 42. So in that 3rd trimester. The one that's currently my favorite is Purina Pro Plan Sport 3020 or puppy food. There are also great products by Hills and by Royal Canin as well. But currently the Purina Pro Plan is my favorite. The next thing is radiographs. So it's really, 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 really important to get an x-ray about 7 to 10 days before her due date. Gestation length is 63 days in dogs. That's 63 days from ovulation. Most of the time they don't have the ovulation date, they have the breeding date. So you can use that 63 number as an estimate, but it actually can be a pretty wide range from breeding date, anywhere from 59 days after breeding to 72 days after breeding. So there's a little bit of fudge room in there. You want to get it kind of close to the due date, because that's when ossification of the fetuses is enough that you can actually get an accurate count. But having an accurate count is so important, because when she's whelping, you need to know when you're done, because if she still has a puppy in there and and the client doesn't know, that's when you start to get mortality problems, morbidity and mortality problems for the mom, not to mention the puppy. Fourth thing that this middle category often misses is what to do with the puppies. So there are really important things. Again, socialization is super important. And so explaining and providing resources for things like touching their feet, experiencing different temperatures, different surfaces, like there's a lot that goes into socialization. So providing them with resources for that. Deworming is super important. Puppies, I mean, how many like worm-filled 8-week-old puppies do we see? A ton of them. Puppies should be dewormed at 2, 4, 6, and 8 weeks. That's according to the Companion Animal Parasite Council. Mom should also be dewormed 2 weeks before whelping, and then also at that 2 week after whelping. And again, all of this is in the resources. So if you're writing frantically, don't worry. I'll get you the resources for this too. But deworming is something that I see a lot of this middle category miss. They just don't realize that their puppies have worms. So, and then again, I have plus minus refer. The middle is definitely even less likely to go to a specialist, but they might. So you can always offer. So then puppy producers, totally honest, don't spend too much time on them. Give them the resources that you gave to the middle. But it can be really frustrating to try to get through to them, because a lot of times they're not going to listen to you. So acknowledge that is a fact, give them the resources, and then try not to stress too much. So that's my thought about puppy producers. Okay, I guess I can pause for a moment. Are there any questions about that first section before I go on to managing dystocia? Any questions?
Okay, there is a question that has just come in. Do you, that's about pseudo pregnancy. So can you put that in your brain for later? You don't have to cover that right now.
Like what pseudo pregnancy is, or about?
Yeah, or maybe how to advise your client. The question was, how do you advise your clients on pseudo pregnancy?
Sure. Okay.
So with the
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. With the vitamins, so you do folic acid on top of multivitamin?
Typically with my middle people, I just do folic acid. That's the one that has the most research behind it on a specific thing. So usually I just do folic acid.
Okay.
And make sure that they have a nutritionally balanced diet, because the diet's going to provide a lot of the minerals that all life stages or puppy diet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I can go ahead and answer the pseudo pregnancy question. So pseudo pregnancy is essentially with the way that the dog's reproductive cycle works. Their body has elevated progesterone all the way from ovulation for several weeks, regardless of whether they're pregnant or not. So it goes all the way to 63 days, which is the gestation length if they are pregnant. If they are not pregnant, it drops a little bit sooner than that, but really only a couple days. And so from the body's perspective, it doesn't always know that it's not pregnant. So typically with pseudo pregnancy, so you have some type of diagnosis. You can diagnose pregnancy if you have ultrasound at about 30 days. The puppies get decently easy to see on ultrasound at 30 days. So if they are wanting to know if she's pseudo pregnant or not, if it's been 30 days, I'll do an ultrasound and say, nope, there's no puppies here. And then if she's looking pseudo pregnant, then I'll just explain like that exact physiology that I just mentioned. Like the progesterone is still elevated. There are no puppies, but the body doesn't know that there's no puppies. So I have had clients come in for x-rays, like thinking that their dog was pregnant and like ready to pop, and then there's no puppies, but she has milk and everything. And it's kind of a sad conversation because usually they're really excited, and then it's like, nope, she just has milk and no puppies. So that's kind of how pseudo pregnancy works. I just basically counsel them on like why it happens. There's nothing in particular that needs to be done particularly. You can use, like, if their behavior is changing, if they're really clingy, if they're really like, because sometimes that does happen too, you can do behavioral modification stuff to change that. But honestly, I don't usually recommend that because it's not, unless it's pathologic, just because it'll go away once the progesterone finally does drop.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll go back to managing dystocia. So if you do see your puppy producers, often this is where you see them, because they often wait to seek veterinary care until they feel like they have absolutely no other choice. But a lot of times, somewhere in your middles and your responsible breeders too, like they might have a dystocia. So knowing time points is going to be really, really important, and it's going to be really important for your staff, for the heel staff, I guess, for Liz and Kaylee, to know like when it's an emergency. So I produced this whelping flow chart that I shared with my clients and the clinics that I work with too. So this is, you start here. And the first thing that you ask is she weak, lethargic, not mentally aware, having discharge that's bright red or dark green before whelping, or has it been greater than 68 days since breeding? If the answer is yes, you go to the vet. If the answer is no, then you say, okay, is she actively pushing? If the answer is yes, you say, how long has she been actively pushing? If it's more than 30 minutes, so 30 minutes of active pushing, you go to the vet. Some people will use an hour of active pushing. I think that is too long, because once she's been actively pushing at home for 30 minutes, by the time you put her in the car, you drive her to the clinic, and she is evaluated by the vet team, often it's been 45 to 60 minutes at that point. So I really want my clients to start moving towards me if it's been any more than 30 minutes. But if they do push back, that might be why. If she has been pushing back for less than 30 minutes, then you go over to, has she had any puppies yet? Or if she wasn't actively pushing, you go down to, has she had any puppies yet? If she has not had any puppies yet, and you ask if she's been in labor for more than 12 hours. If it hasn't been 12 hours yet, you can keep monitoring, but this is a constant process. So you go back, and if at any point any of those decision points change, then you go down a different path. If she has had puppies, then you need to know how long it's been since she's had a puppy. These numbers have recently changed. We used to tell people less than 4 hours. If it was less than 4 hours, then it was okay to keep monitoring. There was a recent study published that showed that if you get more than 2 hours, that's when puppy mortality starts really amping up. Is it possible that a puppy's still born alive after 4 hours? Absolutely. But if we're trying to be cautious and save as many lives as possible, we need them to start going to the vet if it's been more than 2 hours, even if she isn't actively pushing, because the puppies have been in there for too long. Obviously, all of this depends on knowing how many puppies are in there. I always, of course, encourage my clients, like, if you're worried, just come check. Like, we can put an ultrasound probe on and measure fetal heart rates. If you do have ultrasound, which I know a lot of mobile vets don't, but if you do have ultrasound, puppy heart rates for healthy, happy puppies should be above 200 beats a minute. If they start getting much below that, the 180 range, I'll still kind of wait. But if it's anything below 180, it basically needs to go to C-section right then and there, is kind of the way that I approach it. So again, this is another thing that I will send to you guys, so don't worry about scribbling it down. But that is the whelping flow chart there. Okay, and so then we can talk about a couple other questions that Erin sent me that people had brought in. So the first question was, are there any newer sterilization techniques? And the answer is yes and no. There are definitely various different methods for neutering as far as like pre-scrotal versus scrotal, that I think scrotal has increased in popularity recently. Honestly, that area isn't my forte. There are options of ovary sparing spay and vasectomy, which totally honestly like is almost a completely different talk. So I'll try to kind of keep things brief when I talk about that. The idea behind ovary sparing spay or vasectomy is the fact that there is some research, more and more research recently, that is showing that hormones are important in the in structural development, in cancer development, in various other diseases. There was a presentation done out of UC Davis at the Therio conference last year that I haven't seen if the research has actually been published, but they looked at like every breed and predisposition and spay and neuter. It was a very comprehensive thing, and they had some very convincing evidence that being neutered either increased or decreased your risk for certain things. There are some things that it doesn't affect. It's not, you can't really make any generalizations about large breeds versus small breeds. It's just kind of all over the place. But there is some evidence that keeping their hormones until they're sexually mature is better for certain things. So those are the ideas behind the newer sterilization techniques. Ovary sparing spay is exactly what it sounds like. So you leave the ovaries in, you still take the uterus out. Concerns with ovary sparing spay are, one, that there could be a stump pyometra, and two, that the female will still cycle. And so she still may have the pheromones and smell like she's in season. And so if a male were to breed her, and there is the potential that she could develop, that if he ejaculated, that she could develop sperm peritonitis if he ruptured the cranial vagina. That is the concern. So it's definitely something that requires a lot of client education so that they understand that is, it's kind of the special client that is going to be educated enough to understand how to manage a dog that still has her ovaries but doesn't have her uterus. And then vasectomy, basically the same idea as humans. You're removing the male's ability to impregnate a dog without actually removing the hormones entering the bloodstream that way. So newer sterilization techniques. I will comment that there is currently a huge grant out there where people are trying to develop a chemical, a product, a shot, something that could be given one time and then permanently sterilize the animal. That is not currently available. It has not been developed, but there is definitely research coming out. There is interest in this, and there are people looking into various different techniques. And then the other question, are there any oral or other types of birth control being used in dogs, cats now? No, there are not. So that question was pretty straightforward. I've got, well, let's go back before I go to my resources. Are there any other questions? Let me switch back over to this other screen.
Yes. A question about, you mentioned doing the vasectomy, or what about waiting? You said about waiting till they're sexually mature. What would you recommend if you had someone come in, even with a small breed dog, but obviously large breed dogs, in terms of when would you recommend them doing a spay or a neuter?
Right. That's a great question. So it is so individualized. So the very first thing that other than like, are you going to use this dog for breeding, which obviously is the first question. The second question that I ask people is like, are you prepared, like emotionally prepared to deal with an intact animal? because that means if you're talking about a female intact animal, like she's going to have heat cycles, she's going to drip blood. I found that a lot of clients, like just the idea of their dog being in heat, they can't stand that idea. And then with males, I say, like, it is your responsibility to keep him from breeding anyone, because we're not trying to pass his genes on. So that's usually the first place that I start. And if clients are like, I can't, like, I'm not going to do that bleeding in my house thing, then I say, okay, we can spay her at 6 months. Roughly. If they are willing to work through a heat cycle, large breed dogs, I generally recommend 18 to 24 months. That's a lot of heat cycles for someone who doesn't really want to deal with them. So I have found that a fair number of my clients will take their dog through her first heat cycle and then say, I'm never doing that again. Please, can we spay her? And then I say, okay. But for the dog themselves, I typically 18 to 24 months is once they've reached sexual maturity, sexual and physical maturity. And at that point, I recommend that they can be spayed or neutered. But really there's very, very little scientific reason to neuter a dog really neuter a dog at all, because the cancers that we worry about in male dogs go away almost always with neutering. So technically with a male dog, like, you could keep them intact, and then if they do develop cancer, you could neuter them and everything would be fine. Now there are like some ideologies behind behavior and roaming and whatnot. But there honestly isn't like a really super clear picture, because there's so many other factors that go into those things, behavior and anxiety and training, those kind of things. So there's that. But typically 6 months or 2 years, depending on the client and the client's lifestyle and preferences.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, great. So my last slide here is just about additional resources. And again, I can send this to you too. As Samuel mentioned at the beginning, I'm on the board of directors for the Society for Theriogenology. So one of my responsibilities is related to student and new graduate resources. So this was from our student newsletter this most recent quarter, where I compiled a list of online Therio resources. So since the vet students have been all sent home and out of school because of coronavirus, we put together this list so that they could potentially continue studying. When they're at home, you'll see at the bottom, there's some, both Royal Canin and Purina have some really great series of articles for breeders. There are a couple of Facebook groups that I run the student club one, so obviously that one probably wouldn't be applicable for vets. But this one is run by Aaron Runkin, and it's really, really great. That one's a great one. And then there are, Therio Society is doing rounds on VIN now. So those are fun. And then I've got a couple other things on here too. I do have some of my large animal stuff on here just because it was all on there for the students. And then other additional resources, like I said, I can send you guys these 3 things that I've made: the Responsible Breeder Checklist, the Ultimate Guide to Building Your Whelping Kit, and then the Whelping Flowchart that I showed you. I am pretty much constantly creating new resources. So my website is wellbredvet.com, and then /blog is where this content shows up. And then my social media things are at Dr. Christina Baltutis. And then I guess I should have my email address on there, but my email address is kbaltutis@heelhousecall.com or kbaltutis.dvm@gmail.com, but we can get all that information to you too. So that is what I have. So if there are any other questions, I can take them now. And otherwise, we can chat and wrap up. Oh, I just realized I totally skipped over Cocopelli. So Dr. Bruce Christensen, who is a boarded theriogenologist in California, this is his reproductive service. He makes really great resources, and especially on his social media, he has like ultrasound images and stuff. He's doing some really great stuff. Especially recently, he's been doing a lot more. So that one's definitely someone to go follow if you want some cool ultrasound images and stuff like that. So, all right, your question.
Any comments on mammary tumors and spaying?
Sure. So the pre-existing ideology behind spaying them before 6 months was that the risk for mammary cancer increases with each heat cycle. There is an association with that, and that is one of the things that you avoid by spaying early. The thought process behind waiting on that is that there are more aggressive malignant cancers that are more likely if you spay early. And of course, that's super, super breed dependent. But Rottweilers, for example, are like the classic example. They are 4 times more likely to develop osteosarcoma in one study if you spay them before their heat cycle. And so the risk of them dying from osteosarcoma is much higher than them dying of mammary neoplasia. So they're both, it's something to keep in mind. But also it's not actually the biggest risk out there, especially considering that mammary cancer is about 50-50 as far as like benign versus malignant. And if you counsel your owners on how to monitor, or they're coming in for their well checks and you're palpating the mammary chain, they can be identified pretty early and removed much more easier than something like, I use osteosarc, but something like that. Easier to remove a nipple than a leg.
True. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any use of hormones, like giving testosterone after a dog's been neutered, or any of the female hormones to try and avoid those kind of things?
I don't know. I don't know that anyone has tried. I think that it's only been very recent, like the last 5 to 10-ish years, that we've even started to further explore the association of disease, like the diseases that are increased when we spay and neuter. So I think that we haven't really gotten there yet. But honestly, I don't know for sure. That's a good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michelle, do you have any questions? I think that's it, unless Samuel has a question.
I do not have any question.
Well, Dr. Baltutis, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm really excited to share this with the people who couldn't make it today. You've given some really great information. And you are open to people consulting you if they have any questions with their clients. We have mobile vets all over North Carolina. I don't know how far you travel, but I think, you may have some people reaching out to you. So
that's absolutely, of course. And Erin, just let me know the best way.
Okay.
Posting on the Facebook group is the best way to share the PDFs, or whichever way you think is the best to share those.
Okay, I will get in touch and see what the best way to do. I know we have some people who aren't on Facebook too, so we'll want to get it to them. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you guys. Thanks so much for attending, and Sam for making sure everything worked okay. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'll say one last thing. One of our missions at HEAL is eventually to have about 100 veterinarians across the United States in our family. We think that it's a lot easier and funner to have people doing the same thing. So we try to augment mobile veterinary care as a priority #1, regardless if you're with HEAL or not. So think about that when you're going out on your journey. And if you ever wanted to have access to HEAL veterinarians or anything like that, reach out to us. We'd love to add more great people to our team, and we're expanding. So if you know of any veterinarian that is, even if they're in a bricks and mortar practice right now, that are thinking of joining mobile practices. It's a great industry, and I believe that all tides raises all ship, regardless if you're heel or not. I will always support the great people that are doing mobile vet. So good job.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Have a great day. And thanks so much again, Dr. Baltutis.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Yes,
All
thank you. Sorry, I couldn't
Bye.
figure out my mute before. Now my dog's too loud.
All right, you guys. See you later.
See you guys.
Bye.